Donald Trump hit post at 2:47 a.m., and by doing this, Obama didn't simply make America's friends mad. He shot a shockwave right through the heart of the Western banking system. We're talking about an alliance worth nearly $27 trillion, which has been the institutional backbone of global stability since Bretton Woods. And here's what nearly no one is saying out loud. This wasn't just a rant at night. This was a planned campaign to put legal and economic pressure on people. If you take away the politics, it looks a lot like witness intimidation on a global scale. Anyone who knows how real power works should be scared by what happened over the next 72 hours. The public story is that Trump is blustering again, but what prosecutors are quietly observing behind the scenes is a whole different picture. Let's go back. Trump publishes on Truth at 2:47 a.m. Eastern on January 23rd. Socially, telling NATO partners to pay what they owe or face the consequences, and saying that America will decide on its own. Most people didn't care. Same Trump, same talk, same old thing. That idea fell apart in less than 6 hours. First, the European Central Bank called an emergency meeting of its committee without warning. That never happens because of a tweet. Second, Lloyd's of London suddenly stopped offering new sovereign debt insurance to 12 European countries. That's not a symbol. That's a $4.2 trillion market that is hitting the brakes. Third, Germany's constitutional court quickly made a decision about who has the power to spend money on the military. After being quiet for 8 months, a case unexpectedly raced into the calendar with oral arguments slated for early February. Noise doesn't make institutions move in the same way at the same time. You get it when more than one system sees a real threat and starts moving at the same time. This is where it ceases being about foreign policy and starts to appear very different from a prosecutor's point of view. Trump is no longer merely a politician, he is on trial. There are still a lot of investigations going on, the papers case, the obstruction inquiries, and the financial fraud examinations in New York. And every single one of those scenarios depends on something that most people don't think about. International cooperation, Deutsche Bank records, Scottish property appraisals, cross-border financial flows, and intelligence-grade material that doesn't fit neatly within U.S. boundaries. The Department of Justice doesn't just get such stuff out of thin air. It depends on treaties for mutual legal aid, procedures for sharing intelligence, and the precise NATO-affiliated organizations that Trump just threatened. Wait a second on that. A defendant who is being investigated by the federal government publicly shakes up the alliance structures that hold evidence against him. That's not political. That's what prosecutors would call obstruction with a blast radius of trillions. If a regular defendant sought to scare witnesses by threatening the place that keeps evidence safe, prosecutors would be in court the same day. No hesitancy when it comes to emergency motions and protective orders, but people are brushing it off as campaign theater since the pressure is coming from foreign policy language and social media, not at all how it is being handled behind the scenes. Allies have already begun to retaliate in ways that are legal, quiet, and should make DOJ lawyers very uncomfortable. 2 days after Trump's post, the Dutch Ministry of Justice said it would look at all the U.S. legal assistance requests that were still open. That phrase sounds dull. No, it isn't. It's a nice way of saying that we might quit working together. The Netherlands is more than just an ally. They host the International Criminal Court and handle thousands of U.S. subpoenas every year. When they stop, whole investigative pipelines get stuck. Then the finance minister of France gave an interview that should have set off alarms all across Washington. He stressed that France would keep its promises to partners who keep their promises to France. Read that again, but slowly this time. That's not a good sign. That's a warning with conditions. People don't automatically work together anymore. Then Germany came. Germany's Federal Intelligence Service let it slip on purpose that it is reviewing how it shares intelligence with countries who don't keep their promises to be allies. That's not diplomacy in the abstract. That's smart money. Data about transactions. The backbone of global fraud and corruption prosecutions is the evidence. This is why this is important in court. Defendants can't mess with the systems that are gathering evidence against them. That's it. If someone else tried this, prosecutors would label it witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and abuse of process, and they would be right. But Trump's actions are on a geopolitical scale. using alliances and markets instead of phone calls and threats, so the response is stuck. And here's the part that no one likes to say out loud. The Department of Justice is seeing this happen right now, but they don't have many ways to stop it. Let me put this in the words of a prosecutor. Once you view it that way, the threat is impossible to ignore. In 2016, the DOJ went after a Ukrainian oligarch named Dmytro Furt. The case itself wasn't new or unusual. Bribery, corruption, and money trails. The law wasn't the hard part, it was the area. Prosecutors needed proof from Cyprus, Austria, and the UK. That evidence was on paper. In actuality, it took 4 years to put together, not because anyone was hiding information, but because international legal help operates at the pace of diplomacy. One country puts things off for 6 months. One person wants more information, another changes prosecutors, and all of a sudden, statutes of limitations run out, witnesses disappear, accounts get closed, and clear financial trails go dead. Now think about that in terms of Donald Trump. The Manhattan DA's case against the Trump Organization didn't only happen in New York. It was based on records that Deutsche Bank kept in Frankfurt. The German federal prosecutor sent the papers across as part of a pact on mutual legal aid that was inked decades ago. The system will only operate if everyone agrees to keep it that way. If Germany suddenly decides that cooperation is up for review and demands start to be slow-walked because the U.S. is endangering Europe's security framework, that case doesn't just get harder, it gets weaker right away. The same thing is happening in Scotland, where Trump's Gulf estates are now being looked at financially. The same thing happened in Panama, Dubai, and every other place where Trump-affiliated businesses moved money, bought things, or stashed value overseas. This is a nightmare for the prosecution. A defendant who can use international policy to get in the way of his own investigations. And there is a precedent for this that should make everyone extremely concerned. In 2019, the U.S. put sanctions on Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan because of his country's military activities in Syria. It wasn't legal for him to respond. It was planned. He said he would limit access to Incirlik Air Base, a NATO base that is very important to U.S. activities in the area. The fines were less strict in a few weeks. That didn't just happen by chance. That's power. That's what powerful targets do when prosecutors can't get to them through usual legal means. It looks like Trump has mastered the lesson and is using it very well. This is where things go from scary to constitutional. There is one clear, non-negotiable rule that the Department of Justice follows. No one is above the law. That's not a slogan. The whole system's load-bearing beam. But what if the person who is being sued has the power to make the institutions that enforce that principle less stable? What happens when the person being investigated might threaten the tools that are used to acquire evidence? The DOJ has never had to deal with that question on this level before. They are dealing with it presently, and from the point of view of a prosecutor, the answer isn't reassuring because DOJ power doesn't exist in a vacuum. It relies on collaboration across agencies, judges, and importantly, nations. If you take away that cooperation, you're not just making one inquiry weaker, you're making the rule of law less strong. This isn't a political issue, it's about the survival of the institution. Trump's early morning tweet wasn't crazy, it was planned. He's making it so that prosecutors have to make an untenable choice, hold people accountable or keep international partnerships safe. That choice isn't real, but it works because as soon as prosecutors pause or take diplomatic fallout into account while deciding whether to charge someone, prosecutorial independence is already dead. And Trump knows that. He doesn't want to win in court. He wants the courtroom to mean nothing. This is the second effect. This one is for a generation. If this succeeds, if a strong defendant can use threats to foreign policy to stop federal inquiries, a plan is made. Every future political or financial elite will say, if he could do it, why can't I? That's not just a guess. That's how precedent works. And in law, precedent is essential. The third result is the most scary. You can see the judiciary losing its importance in real time. Judges can give people subpoenas. They can make people testify. They can penalize people who get in the way, but they can't make international accords work. They can't make international countries work together. What should a federal judge do if the evidence is in another country and the defendant has influence over diplomatic pressure points? We're moving toward a system where the rule of law doesn't depend on the courts, but on whether our partners in other countries choose to follow it. That's not fair. That's a polite thing to do in diplomacy. And you may take back diplomatic niceties. This is what they still aren't telling you. This moment is about more than just Trump. It extends beyond NATO. It goes beyond just one investigation or courtroom drama. The underlying question here is whether the American judicial system can still hold powerful individuals accountable when those same people may make it harder, slower, or even impossible for the system to hold them accountable. And for now, it's not apparent what it means. So what does that mean for us? The Department of Justice is in a very tough spot. NATO partners are making cold strategic decisions that have nothing to do with justice and everything to do with their own safety and power. Trump is working in the area between law and brute force, and he is doing so with amazing accuracy. This is the kind of moment that decides whether institutions last or slowly go away, because the second accountability rests on the goodwill of foreign governments. It ceases to be accountability altogether. It turns into a negotiation, and you can't negotiate over the rule of law. You either follow it or give in. That's the choice that's being made right now. Not in a courtroom or during a trial, but in the 72 hours after someone posted on social media at 2 a.m. Think about that for a minute. Be on the lookout. Stay up to date, because the following step will tell us